Hi everybody, Aaron here. Today we're going to try something a little different. One of the things that I value most in an RPG is the ability to create unique and inventive character builds. For that reason, I'd like to use this channel to show off some of my builds from RPGs that I'm playing. Most recently, that's been Fallout New Vegas. Now, please note that this is not a tutorial for creating the optimal character build. In fact, I've tried to defy conventional wisdom a great deal to build something interesting. That said, it is certainly a viable build, even for the harder difficulties. Also, please note that this is a build for the complete edition. It's also built with hardcore mode in mind. Okay, with that said, let's jump right in. So we'll start with special distribution. I won't worry here too much about the impact on starting skills. Skills can always be improved in the long run by simply spending skill points. Instead, I'll focus mainly on what secondary stats each special stat influences, since those can't be changed so easily. Right off the bat, there are a couple that I'll just leave alone. Intelligence determines the number of skill points available per level. I want a decent intelligence score to help get my skills where I need them quickly for certain perks. Plus, there are quite a few dialogue options that require decent intelligence. Still, in the long run, I'll have little problem maxing out all my relevant skills, since the complete edition raises the level cap all the way to 50. Hence, there's no reason to raise intelligence either. Same goes for strength, which determines carry weight and also what weapons can be handled effectively. Prior is mostly a matter of convenience, and the latter is a binary equation. So again, I don't need a lot. I just need exactly enough to meet the minimum requirements for my chosen weapons. And as it happens, that's 5 for this build. I'll also reduce both perception and luck to free up more points. Perception only determines the range at which enemies appear on the radar. This isn't that important to begin with, though, and can be easily addressed with a companion perk. Luck is a little better, as it determines base critical hit rate. Still, it only grants a 1% increase per point. The impact of this varies by weapon, but will generally work out to no more than a couple percent more damage, and less with the weapons I'll be using. Granted, by dumping these stats, I will miss out on the infamous Better Criticals perk. This perk is incredible in a sniper or sneak build, or one that maximizes critical rate with perks and equipment. However, that's not what I'm building today, and with a low critical chance, this perk actually only translates to an increase in average damage of about 5% or so. It's still good if available, but hardly vital. As for stats I want to increase, the first is endurance, which I'll set to 9. I want this character to be a durable shock trooper who can get in close and trade shots with enemies, and endurance gives a major bonus to HP. Also, endurance determines the number of special implants I can install later on. With such high endurance, I can get all 9 of them, including 2 that provide extra armor and health regeneration, as well as 7 that boost a particular special stat by 1. In this way, investing points in endurance almost pays for itself. I can now set all special stats 1 point lower than my eventual goal, and let implants take care of the rest. Hence the reason I've only set this to 9 and not 10. Secondly, I'll set agility to 9 as well. Agility determines action points in VATS, as well as reload speed. For sniper builds, there's something to be said for shooting manually, since VATS hit rates fall off badly at long range. At closer ranges, though, there's little reason not to be shooting in VATS as much as possible, since it grants a small bonus to critical chance and moderately reduces damage taken. Plus, it makes it so much easier to reliably land headshots amid the chaos for double damage. Finally, I'm going to set Charisma to 9 as well. New Vegas is unique among Fallout games in that each point of Charisma gives companions a direct 5% boost to damage and armor. This is a pretty impressive boost to total party damage when spread across 2 companions, and especially useful on harder difficulties, where companions don't suffer the same modifier to damage that the player does. Of course, this bonus can wind up being wasted if you play a stealth or sniper build, which limits your companion's ability to actually participate in combat. But I'm going to jump right into the fray mostly, and having two powerful companions blasting away and also drawing some enemy fire is tremendously helpful. And that's it. To recap then, my starting special stats will look like this. And my final stats will look like this. Now let's talk about traits. I'm going to take Hot-Blooded, which gives a 10% damage boost when I fall below 50% HP, but only at the expense of -2 perception and agility. I've already discussed how perception doesn't really matter, and in a situation where my health is below 50%, I'm happy to trade 6 points of max AP for a flat boost to damage. I'll also take Fast Shot. It increases rate of fire in VATS and reduces AP cost by 20% in exchange for a 20% drop in accuracy. This is a huge reduction in AP cost, and while the accuracy loss can be significant for longer range characters, it becomes meaningless at close range. So long as I'm within a few meters of an enemy, I'll still be 95% accurate, the maximum in VATS, even for headshots. Alright, now that we've got the initial setup done, let's move on to the meat of the build, perks. Along the way we'll cover equipment here too. One fun thing I did with this character is deliberately and permanently give them deadly radiation poisoning. Why, you might ask? For the sake of two perks. The first is Rad Child, which gives a total of 8 health regeneration per second with deadly radiation poisoning. This isn't just useful to save on stim packs between fights either. It's strong enough to actually outpace many lower DPS enemies mid-combat. Mind you, it does drop off a bit late game when damage and HP values are a lot higher, but it's still a constant trickle of healing that offsets some of the incoming damage that this character will take. Even better is the second perk, Atomic, which grants a whopping 50% boost to AP regeneration with deadly radiation poisoning. This synergizes great with the Fast Shot trait, which already lets me do more with my AP. I'll also further enhance both by stacking additional perks. Nerves of Steel, which boosts AP regen by another 20%, and Math Wrath, which reduces AP consumption by another 10%. I also took both ranks of Action Girl for some additional max AP, and Grim Reaper's Spirit to restore a bit of AP upon a kill, although the latter was low priority since this character already regenerates over 10 AP per second on their own. Cumulatively, this allowed me to fire almost exclusively in VATS. Of course, deadly radiation poisoning does have its downsides. It inflicts a penalty of -2 strength, 2 agility, and 3 endurance. I can mitigate this somewhat though. The strength is easily offset with the special Reinforced Spine perk given upon the completion of the Old World Blues DLC. I also partially offset the endurance loss with the Atomic Valence Oscillator headgear. It also adds a bit more HP regeneration too, although it's negligible next to Rad Child. Beyond that, I mostly just accepted these penalties. They're not actually that impactful, only costing me 40 max HP and 6 max AP. This is absolutely nothing compared to what's gained in HP and AP recovery through these two perks. Another cool perk I took was Implant GRX. With both ranks, it gives the player 10 free, non-addictive turbo injections each day. These injections drastically slow down time while still allowing the player to move and fire at normal speed. On their own, these only last 3 seconds, but they can be enhanced with the Chemist perk and also the Day Tripper Challenge perk, which extends the duration all the way to 8 seconds. That's real time too. In perceived time, it's over 20 seconds. This is easily the best defensive perk in the game, since it majorly reduces enemy damage per second. Plus, one can often just dodge melee attacks outright. It's an absolutely huge boon for close-range builds like this one. The only real downside is that it does slow player HP and AP regeneration, although no more so than it slows enemy DPS, of course. Now, for defense, I wanted a simple high damage threshold too. My main source of damage threshold was the Ganon family Tesla armor. Not only does it boast the second highest DT in game, it's also a medium armor, which means less of a movement speed penalty. To further improve my DT, I also took both ranks of toughness and also Stonewall. The latter is situational, but works against some of the deadliest creatures in game. The immunity to knockdown is also really useful. Hit the deck is also moderately helpful, although it only makes a dent relative to most explosives. Also useful is the special Big Brained perk from Old World Blues, which, instead of a flat bonus, increases DT by 10%. With all these combined, I had more than 50 DT, and very few enemies in the game posed a legitimate threat. It's worth noting, too, that DT is applied before the difficulty bonus, so it continues to make a huge difference even on very hard. As for offense, I used energy weapons for this build, since on average they have lower strength requirements than guns. For the early game and or weaker enemies, I used the MF Hyper Breeder Alpha. This neat little gun doesn't require ammo, instead it recharges over time. It's not a bad weapon either. It has a solid DPS due to its very high rate of fire. The only problem is that you can only fire continuously for a few seconds before it runs dry. Even this isn't too bad though, since that's enough to shred most middling foes, and it only takes a couple seconds to recharge, which is usually time needed to close the distance to the next target anyway. It does cease to be as effective though once Implant GRX is available, since the effect slows down its recharge considerably. Still, it was absolutely worth keeping all game as a utility weapon. For more powerful foes, though, I carried the Spurtel Wood 9700. This monster has one of the highest DPS rates in the game, and only requires 6 strength to use. It chews through ammo very quickly, but I was flush with ammo thanks to using the Hyper Breeder much of the time. I also took the Vigilant Recycler perk, which cuts down on ammo burn considerably, and unlocks superior crafting recipes for special ammo. This is key to addressing the 9700's other major weakness, damage thresholds. Since this gun does very minimal damage with each individual bullet, losing 10 plus points off each shot to DT hugely diminishes the gun's damage. But using optimized ammo, or in the most extreme cases, max charge ammo, negates 5 or 10 points of DT. With that, the 9700 can tear through even the toughest enemies in a few bursts. I also used a pulse gun. This specialty gun does almost no base damage, but does massive bonus EMP damage to robots and power armor. This provided an easy answer to many of the highest damage threshold enemies in the game, and saved max charge ammo for those others who weren't susceptible to EMP. These weapons all benefit from a couple perks as well. The first is Laser Commander. It gives laser weapons a nice 15% damage boost and an additional 10% critical chance. Most critical chance boosts are fairly useless for my main guns, since, like all automatics, both have a detrimental modifier. In the 9700's case, it renders critical chance almost negligible with a 0.04 multiplier. However, this particular boost is applied as a flat bonus, which gets around this problem. The other perk is the special companion perk, Camaraderie. With Eddie as a companion, it gives a small bonus to DT and VAT's hit rate. Even better though, it gives a flat plus 5 damage per shot with laser weapons. For high power, low rate of fire weapons this isn't much, but for rapid fire weapons like the Hyper Breeder and the 9700, this is a massive increase, capable of almost doubling damage in the latter case. I also took the Meltdown perk, which causes killed enemies to explode, harming those nearby. Honestly, I'm not sure if this is actually a good perk. It can be mildly useful for spreading a little extra damage around against swarming enemies. However, its range is quite limited, and you can hurt yourself and your allies with it. It's super fun, though, to see your enemies explode in a corona of energy, and sometimes you've just gotta choose gratuitous explosions over common sense. Plus, its downsides are somewhat mitigated by the Spray and Pray perk, which I also took, and which makes friendly fire on companions negligible. I grabbed a few non-energy weapon specific perks as well. Concentrated Fire adds a flat 5% to hit rate with each consecutive shot. That's not a ton, but it has the advantage of applying to every weapon. It's not meant to turn a 50% chance into 100%, it's just a small bump across the board. I also grabbed Rapid Reload. I don't want to be caught reloading when in the middle of a firefight. Plus, there was nothing available at level 2 that was better. I also took Bloody Mess and Thought You Died for a simple damage boost, and in the latter case, a nice HP boost that adds even more survivability to the build. Lastly, I took a few non-combat utility perks. Pack Rat was a must for hardcore mode. It halves the weight of ammo, but also most food and water. Adamantium Skeleton is also quite nice for this character in hardcore mode, where Stimpaks don't heal limb damage. Lastly, but not least, I took the Jury Rigging perk. The only downside to the Ganon Tesla armor is that it has incredibly specific repair requirements. However, with this perk, it can be fixed with any medium armor, making it much easier to repair than other power armors. It's also just a great perk overall for simplifying repairs. And that's it. That's all 25 perks this build uses. There's less to say about skills, since long-term, most relevant ones were simply maxed, but I should touch on priority. Initially, I prioritized getting survival to 70 so I could take Radchild at level 4. This was essential, as there isn't any other level 4 perk this build uses. After that, improving energy weapons and getting science to 70 for Mathrath and Vigilant Recycler became the priority. Once that was dealt with, I aimed for Barter of 70 and a repair of 90 for Packrat and Jury Rigging, although neither were essential until heavy weapons and armor became available. A medicine of 60 was also needed for Chemist, but not until late game after Implant GRX. Through this entire process, I dropped a couple points into Speech wherever I could. It's simply an amazing skill. I dropped just enough points into Sneak as well to allow for improved holdout weapons, and ignored lockpicking since I was already strong in hacking until the very end. Eventually, I brought guns to 60 and explosives to 72 for perks, but only very late game once I had points to burn. I also want to talk about consumable items. I'm of a mind that a good build shouldn't constantly rely on consumables, but they are helpful for especially tough fights. Particularly suitable for this build is Fire Ant Nectar. This item is readily available from Fire Ants and boosts agility by 4. That's enough to counteract the agility loss from radiation, as well as the loss from hot-blooded should that trait activate as well. Buff Out can also be useful to fully erase the radiation endurance loss, although it carries a risk of addiction and is harder to farm. Most importantly though are the drugs Med-X and Slasher. While most enemies top out around 100 base damage per hit, there are a select few who can do 300 plus. Against them, no attainable amount of armor alone will save you. These drugs, however, reduce incoming damage by a percentage, whereas DT merely subtracts a fixed number from it. What's more, this percentage is applied before DT. As such, even 300 damage turns into 150 damage with both drugs active, and then only 100 damage after DT. Even after the difficulty modifier is added, this allows this character to survive several hits, even by the game's deadliest creatures. That about covers my character, but in closing, I should talk about companions as well. As mentioned earlier, Eddie was my non-human companion for his unique perks. He also contributes some serious damage too, since I opted to upgrade his weapons. It does come at the expense of armor though, so it pays to set him to keep his distance. Mostly I used Veronica as my human companion. She actually has energy weapons tagged, contrary to her default pistol. I gave her Elijah's advanced LAER instead. Fully upgraded, this is an extremely powerful weapon that is only balanced out by its extremely low durability. However, companions don't incur durability damage to their weapons. Mind you, giving her a different weapon does mean providing her with ammo regularly, but I could always set her to melee attack as well to save ammo. She can also wear power armor, which, after my charisma boost, gives her a pretty massive damage threshold. Short of letting her go toe-to-toe with an alpha Deathclaw, I really didn't need to worry at all about her dying whatsoever. And that's it. That covers everything. I'll probably do more of these videos in the future, although perhaps not as long next time. Thanks for watching, and please remember to like and subscribe.
Yippee-yay, there'll be no wedding bells for today. I got spurs that jingle, jangle, jingle,
Jingle jangle,
as I go riding merrily along.
jingle jangle,
And they sing, oh, ain't you glad you're single?
jingle jangle,
And that song ain't so very far from wrong.
jingle jangle,
Oh, Lily Bell,
oh Lily Bell,
oh, Lily Bell.
oh Lily Bell.
Though I may have done some fooling, this is why I never fell. 'Cause I got spurs